first one, I just wanted to say at the beginning a few of the things that Dave and I have spoken about, how we can try and make sure that scrutiny is really firing on all cylinders this year. I think we've got a really important committee. A lot of the issues I know we all get raised to us as ward councillors go through this committee. We'll come onto the agenda a bit later on. I think for me personally, it's something that's been raised during the time I've been a councillor, which is about cabinet member attendance at these committees. And so it's really pleased to have both cabinet members in attendance tonight. And I hope that's something that we can continue with throughout the year. It's my view, and I think we spoke about this, didn't we, Dave, that if a cabinet member isn't here for the scrutiny of something that's in their brief, then actually it shouldn't be going through scrutiny at that time. And so my proposal as we go out throughout the year is that we delay any agenda items where the cabinet member isn't in attendance for whatever reason. On that, I would also say that I don't view scrutiny as a forum to shout about very specific items of ward casework. Obviously, it influences our views of the borough and it influences the things that we'd like to see done, but it's not the appropriate place to be raising that tree or that pothole. And so if that could be kept in mind throughout so that we can keep our time laser focused on the big issues that we've got. I'd also say that I think what we want to see from this is scrutiny of content. And I've been in scrutiny meetings before where we've talked about whether the punctuation is right, whether that graph is the clearest it could possibly be, which is all very important stuff, but maybe something that should be in an email before the meeting starts rather than during the meeting. I think we've got a lot to get through this year. And if we can focus on the content of these reports, I think scrutiny can have a really positive impact on the borough. And we do that, I think, by making recommendations. So one of the things I've asked from officers is to make sure that if a paper is coming to scrutiny, there's a purpose for it to come to scrutiny. I don't think it's appropriate for us to be sent reports that are just to be nodded through and to be noted. And I'd like it if, when we look at the recommendations of any agenda item, that we're making additional recommendations as much as possible too, because I think this is a really good opportunity to steer the direction of the council. That's all from me. I don't know if anything more. No. Okay, well, in that case, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, apologies received from councillors Webb and councillors Clinton.
Brilliant, thank you. And
that's me. That's just me on the. That's me on noise.
And do we have any substitutes?
We do, Chair. We've got Councillor Collins and Councillor Russen.
Brilliant. And just to introduce you all as well to Councillor Alistair Dewhurst, who's in the corner there. So Alistair Dewhurst is from the LGA and has been supporting chairs through the agenda setting process, and is going to be coming to a few scrutiny sessions. So if you want others, you'll see him again, I'm sure, and feel free to grab him for any questions or challenges later on. Do we have any interests under the Members' Code of Conduct? Yes, Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. I think myself and Councillor Kettle, both being members of West Midlands Combined Authority on Transport Delivery, looking at one of the agendas, it could possibly result in talking about the Metro. So I thought it probably best to mention that so that you're aware of it. That's by myself and Councillor Kettle for the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Brilliant. Thank you.
But I presume, sir, that it is the Metro, the misalignment. Yeah, I guess you couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah. And do we have anyone in public forum? Martin, do you want to say anything? Thank you, Martin. Yeah. Sorry, I can hear myself, but I can't hear. Okay, fine. Okay, so programme of meetings and business items for 25-26. Is that you, Karen?
Yeah, I'll take that, Chair. And just for ease, I'm just going to share just the schedule for the year. Screen. So obviously we don't need to see this evening, so that just takes September, October, November, January and March. So the report has been circulated, so I'm going to be very brief in my introduction. So this report sets out the programme of meetings and the outline of the business items for the municipal year ahead for this new Scrutiny Committee on Communities and Growth. Clearly, we all recognise the need for flexibility and to recognise that things will change during the year and you may need to put items on or take items off as we move through the year. However, this is a starting point and there will continue to be ongoing liaison with yourself, Chair, and the Vice Chair and other members to make sure that the agenda remains relevant and focused during the year with clear outcomes as well on those items. Also attached to the report for members' information and background are the Council Scrutiny Procedure Rules, which incorporate the terms of reference for the committee. So with that, Chair, it's over to yourself and the committee for any comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to introduce myself, Aftab Razak, Director for Legal Compliance and Assurance. Just thought there was value in terms of the particular report and highlighting the workshop that took place last week with the LGA. I understand that the training notes and the presentations have been circulated to the committee itself. The focus on the workshop was some key areas. One of them was the work programming and understanding the real focus in terms of that scrutiny work programme. Certainly echo the comments made by Councillor Priest at the outset. And just in terms of that work programme criteria, just some key considerations for the members to emphasise. Firstly, does the issue affect a number of people living and working in Dudley? Is the issue strategic and significant? Can scrutiny add value? Will performance improve as a result of scrutiny input? Will scrutiny be duplicating other work? Is the council due to review the policy area? And is it an issue of concern to the community partners and stakeholders? And also the formulation of smart objectives in alignment in terms of the key consideration of that work programme. We also discussed the value of looking at the forward plan in terms of cabinet decision making and having visibility of that within this forum as well. Happy to take any questions, but just thought it was worth highlighting that within the context of the report before you.
Thank you. And I just add into that as far as I think Councillor Roberts and I are concerned, that this is an agenda that belongs to all of us. So if there are items that you'd like to see on it from the outset, now if there's things that you think about throughout the year, absolutely, let's get them on there. This is an agenda item that we've asked to be at every meeting so we can see what's upcoming. As I said at the beginning, it is a very busy committee, and I think it's going to work at its best if we're all working together to get the agenda spot on. Councillor Sahota.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, couldn't make the workshop on the 9th, and I did briefly mention this to Councillor Phipps. I think it was my fault. I should have maybe dropped an email to yourselves. I think because this is a new committee that brings together a number of service areas from different directorates. I think neighbourhoods, obviously, Councillor Caulfield's here from neighbourhoods, and obviously Councillor Phipps here from region and growth. I think it would be good practice for all the committee to actually have a bullet point of the service areas which fall under these different directors, because there's a lot of swapping and sort of going on. So at least we're a bit clear in terms of what the key areas we are going to be overseeing as a scrutiny role. I think that's first thing. I think that's just is essential, because like I said, it's a big area that it's in your face in our communities, in our wards. So that's first thing. And I think the other thing I think I've just noticed from the agenda is obviously we have got a number of key specific areas we're going to be scrutinising antisocial behaviour. I think as ward members, we've talked about this area for a number of years about the need to improve this. So I think before we discuss that as a scrutiny, we need to know where we are in terms of how our performance has been over the years. What is the council now doing to change things to improve the service deliveries in terms of the Dudley Council plan, in terms of working together with directorates, no silo working, how we're going to be working with communities, residents groups to actually really nail that on its head, because that affects every councillor in this borough. across the 24 wards, regardless of where you know, what party you are. So I think it's imperative that going forward, we need the reassurance that we are going to get antisocial behaviour under control, working with the police, working with the communities, etc. So that's the key thing. And I think the other key thing I think we do need to understand as a committee is that there's all councils have been given additional resources for potholes, you know, bugbear of all our work we do. And I think it's essential we do have some reassurance from Nick and obviously Simon Phipps that this additional funding that's coming to Dudley is going to basically help to close the gap, Nick, because we know as councillors that in the past, because the slice of the cake has been limited, certain parts in each of our wards have got left behind. And, you know, we tend to just do the main roads or the other roads. If we go into any council estate in our wards, the evidence is there in black and white. So we need some reassurance that, as suggested by the council, that we're going to use this additional funding to close the gap, because we need to measure that going forward. Because if we don't do that, then that gap's going to carry on going wider and wider. So these are kind of things I think we do need to know as a committee going forward. And obviously, you know, there is other areas, but I think once we got that bullet point of information of all the service areas, then hopefully there should be a bit of opportunity for us scrutiny members to say to the chair or to the directors, maybe we need to look at this, look at that. So I think hopefully people will agree with what I've just said. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good point. We broadly themed the agenda so that it'll be one of the two cabinet members for each. Even so, you know, it's great to have Damien here, but the items for tonight largely fall under Councillor Phipps's brief. But I think you're absolutely right. If we can know who directly is responsible going forwards on that agenda, I think that's a good idea. Does someone want to come in on about data points for upcoming agenda items?
Oh, sorry.
That's yeah. So well, first and foremost, hopefully everybody knows who I am. But just for the avoidance of any doubt, Nick McGurk, in my new role as Group Director for Communities and Growth. Don't panic too much. You're not going to see me all of the time. Everybody's well aware. I know. Everybody's well aware of the senior management review, etc. And at the moment, obviously for Communities and Growth, and it comes to the heart of some of your points, Councillor Tota, we are in that recruiting stage as well. So for this item this evening, I've sort of continued, as you like, within my sort of old role. In answer to your first question, absolutely more than happy to circulate tomorrow morning a little bit of an explanation for the committee, sort of bullet points as to the different areas within the Communities and Growth group, if you like. You know, I would love to be able to give you dedicated people under the Communities and Growth structure, if you like, but at the moment they're being recruited to. What I can give you and what I will provide to you are key people that work within that group at the moment. Now, of course, people are still working within that those sort of old systems and the systems that we had, whether it's environment or regen, but you will still have key people and you will see them and they will be coming to the committees to discuss various different items. So point you pick up about ASB as an example, you know, there'll be colleagues that actually sit in housing at this point in time, but of course the community assets of the ASB will sit within Communities and Growth. So I'm happy to circulate that round. I'll pass it through yourself, Chair, as well, to circulate, you know, tomorrow morning to give us a bit of a better understanding. But it is a work in progress. And I think as we start to go throughout, I would hope that when we get to sort of October, November, we may start to see some other faces, some new faces in here going through some of those items.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Kettle and then Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Ron. In our title, we now have the growth scrutiny. Growth in the economy and the nighttime economy of Dudley, obviously, is something we should have concentrated on a long time ago. So I'm very favourable of this coming onto the agenda. But I do think we need briefings from people or with an economist background to understand what's going on in the borough. And the difficulty will obviously always be having up-to-date information to work on. So as delighted as I am to see that on the agenda, I think it's going to be a difficult one, but we've got to specifically go for people in the know who know what they're talking about as far as the economy is concerned.
Yeah.
That's the first one. Aftab, you mentioned the community element of your remit. Today I had a case where a simple play area in a street was held up by public liability insurance that was being asked for by the council. Could we not find a way of simplifying this when it's a trivial small amount that can hold up an awful lot of community meetings? Could we either direct people to a very cost-efficient way of doing this sort of business, or find a way of helping these people along these lines? Because the public health, public liability insurance to the uninitiated is a bit of a shock, and it must be killing an awful lot of activities off before they get off the ground. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to come back on that particular point. I think in terms of that, the point in terms of public liability insurance, I think when the committee are looking at whether it be that particular matter or whether it be other matters, it's understanding what is the overall outcome, what is the committee looking to achieve by either engaging with external stakeholders, members of the public, and within the context of the example that you've just cited, it is that public liability insurance element, but then where is that alignment in terms of the overall outcomes of the council? So I think it's all of that alignment and trying bringing that together. What I would also add is that I am working with my team to ascertain as to what guidance and additional tools we can give to this committee in terms of undertaking effective scrutiny, formulating those work programmes, and being that critical friend in amongst all that. So hopefully that addresses that broad point, and happy to take that point around public liability insurance outside of this committee if necessary.
The point I'm trying to make is that if you want communities to work, we've got to help them to come together and not put a bureaucratic wall in front of them every time they speak to the council. Closing off a road for 3 hours in an afternoon, not a main road, a cul-de-sac even, shouldn't give us a major headache, or shouldn't be a major headache to anyone. So if we want the community side of what we're dealing with to work, we've got to make it easier.
So, Councillor, could I suggest that we park that one until we've got the October meeting, which is support for friends groups? So I think we've got I agree with you, and there's certainly friends groups that I've helped with where this has been a big problem. I suspect it's something that's going to come out of that session with the friends groups, and that will also give us time to work on what the council support can be offered in that time. Is that okay? And then on your point about getting expert opinions, I think it's one of the things I'm really keen on as well, is on all these agenda items that we're looking external to the council to get people in. So on the antisocial behaviour item, I'd be expecting to see the police there. Right? It would be good to get external, local economists to come in for the high streets one. I think that's something that we can aim to do for the vast majority of these sessions, is at least invite external people to speak to us. Councillor Caulfield, did you want to come in on that point?
Only just quickly, just to come on from a comment that Councillor Sahota said. I just want to reassure members of this committee that I'm looking forward for total transparency and real scrutiny again this year. We've had 2 years, and Nick will come in on what I've said. We've had 2 years of really good scrutiny, but certainly on from the highway side. Every road that we've done over the last 2 years with the proactive repair and maintenance programme has been published on the council's website. There hasn't been any areas, council estates, that have been left out. And I'm sure, now my colleague, Councillor Phipps, has taken it on. The new highways maintenance programme, the equilibrium is exactly the same as it was before. So I know Councillor Sahota likes to use the two-tier scenario, but I just want to reassure other members here tonight that, nothing's off the table, and I'm looking forward to open and good scrutiny. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caulfield. Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, mine's a rather simple one, actually, Mr. Chairman. It won't take quite so long. It's just referring back now to the proposed meeting for the 12th of November. And it says road repairs and drain cleaning. I'd like to know the difference between drain cleaning and gully emptying, please. I mean, we've got gully emptying, 2 empty gullies, but I mean, what drains are we thinking of cleaning?
That one for you.
I'll pick this up, and hopefully, yeah, that could be my easiest question of the night. There is no difference. I think it's just how it's worded there. Essentially, it's gully emptying, gully cleaning. I think it's just been labelled as drain cleaning on the report, which we can change for clarity.
And if I could just come back on the same agenda, on adopted roads, I mean, it's always been the council policy, if it's unadopted, it's the residents' responsibility for doing it and putting things right. Are you suggesting that we start paying for it now?
Is that one for you, Councillor Phipps?
Respectfully, I think it would be for you as the chair, because you've asked for that to be put on the agenda. And at the moment, I'm not entirely sure exactly what in the report you'd be looking for us to have, other than simply stating what our policy is for dealing with unadopted roads, the policy of getting them on board to be adopted, and all that sort of stuff. So it's over to you.
I think you've articulated it brilliantly there. I obviously, this isn't the administration, this is a scrutiny committee. I know it's an issue that comes up across the borough fairly often, certainly in my own ward as well. It's on there so we can provide scrutiny of the issue of unadopted roads, what the current policy is, and if there needs to be any additional recommendations to that policy.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if I could just come back, I think this is one we've got to be very careful over. If you do one, you set a precedence. If you do one, you do the lot. So I think it needs to look at very, very closely.
Thank you. And I think that's something we can consider on the evening. I'll take that on board. Councillor Sota.
Just one observation and just a quick one. Obviously this committee will cover regeneration. So I think we do need to somehow put some updates on some of the larger regeneration projects, because I think it's missing at the moment. We've got obviously NICOM. That's something we can, I think we need to put it in there. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine. Shall we work on that, Karen, and we'll come back with a date? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Is there anything else on this item? Go ahead.
I went to a couple of conferences in the last week or so, and the levelling up from the combined authority and the national, people talking on the national level. I think we need to be looking at levelling up funds when they come available into the West Midlands, or they are available. And I don't think these levelling up should not be on the agenda. We ought to go chasing this money.
Okay. So is your suggestion there that levelling up bids, each individual bid is placed on the agenda?
I do apologise. A perspective concerning levelling up funds that are said to be coming in the area. And I noticed that some shadow ministers and ministers have now got levelling up in their title and their agenda. So it's going to be a much higher profile. And if the money's available, we've got to find a way of keeping it on the agenda and going for it.
We'll go to Councillor Phipps and then Aftab.
Yeah, so thank you. I think it's a very good point that actually the regeneration part of my brief probably isn't in there as much as I would have expected. So if it is something that the committee wants, very happy to tag that onto one of the meetings that sort of like is primarily on mine, if that's the way that you'd like to do it. I think it would be a good thing to roll it in, because I agree with Ian. One thing that I think the authority really does need to make sure it's doing top work on is utilising and maximising the external grant funding that is available. And the model is changing quite significantly now. I think a lot of it will end up at the combined authority rather than with individual councils. And so we'll be moving from a relationship of dealing with government departments to dealing with the combined authority. Now, that could be a blessing and a curse, because we don't quite know how it will all work with the CA just yet. But certainly we've all had our frustrations dealing with government departments over the years, I'm sure. But I think if we could perhaps maybe have, it could just be one item, it's up to you, but an item on regeneration projects, and also on our sort of external grant funding when it comes to regeneration pots, because there's a lot of stuff out there, and I agree, utilising this committee to make sure that the council is absolutely maximising what we can get out of that is a really good way to go forward.
Thank you. And Aftab.
Yeah, just through you, Chair, in terms of the level of funding, in terms of previous level of funding, there is, and it feeds into the point that I made earlier in terms of the forward plan. If there is levelling of funding being determined by the Cabinet, then there is a requirement that it would be on the forward plan. So that's where the committee would be looking at that forward plan, identifying that forward funding in terms of that levelling up funding, and if necessary, scrutinising that decision-making process within this forum.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, just coming back to regeneration, one of the things I'd be very keen to see on here is stall sites. We got stall sites within the borough.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. We're talking about the old General Post Office in Wolverhampton Street, which has been vacant now for 20 years, and there's only one. If you walk up the high street, there's several. Some of them, the faces are dropping off them onto people walking by. I think we ought to, you know, really consider doing something about the stall sites. They've been with us such a long time. As I said, one is 20 years old, and there's surely others that followed or even before. So it is important we start getting the town looking something like, you know, that's part of the regeneration programme, and the stall sites are a big part to play in that.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything from anybody else? No? Okay. We will take those on board, and I mean, it sounds to me like we'll need to find another agenda date rather than tag them on, but we'll come back to you as soon as we can with what that looks like. If we move on to the next agenda item, which is the parking strategy. Who do we have presenting this one?
I'll introduce it to start off with. That's all right.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So, thank you very much for asking for this to come onto the agenda. It's one of those things that if it wasn't, it's very unlikely that it wasn't going to be on the list, but it would be something that I would have wanted to bring to scrutiny regardless, because obviously there's been a significant amount of work and change has gone on over the last couple of years when it's come to the parking strategy. The report isn't extremely long. It is something that I'm hoping all members will have read, so we're not going to be reading through the report, so to speak, but I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things on there which I think are very pertinent given recent announcements. First of all, I'll deal with the addendum that you've had. So obviously there was an announcement made with regards to what our aspirations are for later in the year to reduce tariffs on our council-owned car parks. Now, that is something that has been being discussed for a few months now. So when this came on the agenda, it wasn't quite ready to get in the main report, but I asked the officer team to make sure there was an addendum, so at least it's written down here, so you're able to scrutinise on that particular point, and obviously welcome questions when it comes to those proposals and how we're going to be able to deliver that later in the year. As you can see, we did make changes to the car parking tariffs in October last year, and that has gone a long way to assisting the financial position that the council was in back then. A financial position that has changed considerably in the months since then, and as you'll see from the outturn figures that we had at Cabinet a few weeks ago, the council is in a hell of a lot more secure situation than what it was previously. That's not the end of the journey. We've still got, you know, years of making sure that we meet balanced budgets in order to make sure that we continue to put money back in the reserves. However, I think one thing that everyone in this room will agree is that we have an aspiration to support our towns and support businesses in the towns. And so as and when the council was in a position to not look at parking charges solely as income, but to go back to a position of looking at car parking charges, not just about controlling congestion, controlling pollution, but also looking at ways that car parks can help support our town centres. And that's something that I hope with the announcement that's been made and the addendum you've got in there is demonstrating that the authority is looking towards doing in the future. There's a few other elements in the report as well about specific parts of the parking strategy. I'm not going to read through them all, but one thing that I wanted to kind of highlight to you is that in order to pull all of this work together and deliver a strategy which then goes towards implementation, it will take resources. In the finance element of the report, it details that it would be roughly £200,000 to be able to produce that and to then move towards implementation on some of the other things that we would want to do. Now, that isn't necessarily something that I think we're going to be able to find mid-year. So that is something that if we're in a position to during the budget setting process, we would be looking towards a budget growth. In the meantime, I think what everybody's preferred situation would be is that we continue to prioritise resources for actually delivering on the ground and getting stuff done in the department. So right now, I'm not looking to tell you that there's £200,000 there to deliver this strategy and to be able to come back at the meeting where you've asked for it to come back to and say, here's a draft strategy for you, because the resources are not quite there for that now. However, I think this process will be very helpful towards setting out what the priorities should be when we do come to produce that strategy. Hopefully, if we're able to achieve some budget growth in the budget, but that will all depend on, you know, a lot of other significant factors when it comes to budget setting too. So that was the main things I wanted to cover. Nick, do you want to go through anything before we open it up for discussion?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I won't read through the report. I think really just going back to some of the recommendations, I suppose, and some of the benefits for ourselves as officers and sort of healthy scrutiny. Really, what we've set out is the current position on parking provision, and hopefully that's sort of in a readable format, whether that's with the new tariffs as of October last year, or equally with the new position on the enforcement of parking as well. Again, I suppose touching on what Councillor Phipps has said there, you know, hopefully the committee, through reading this report and through any discussions this evening, really it's around us recognising the need for investment in the borough in terms of development of a future car parking strategy. I'm not aware or have not come across Dudley Borough ever having a parking strategy. It's certainly not over the last sort of 10 to 15 years. And like I say, this is based not on a financial standpoint at all, but more from a pollution, congestion and a fairness perspective as well. And the other thing as well is around really your steer on any elements of a parking strategy or a policy. You know, I think this is it's a significant any parking strategy is significant to the borough and to the communities and to individual areas as well. So, you know, your inputs, your steers, as well as, you know, if and when, as Councillor Phipps says, in terms of some of that funding, you know, as well as businesses, you know, residents, communities, etc. So, yeah, rather than read through it, I'm happy to open up to any questions that you may have.
Councillor Bills.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I always found it fascinating that I mean, I used to be the cabinet member for this, and I used to dream that we would have the machines we have now, because you can calibrate those to whatever you want. So some parts of Kent, it's something like £1 for the day, and other parts of Kent, they've calibrated them to be sort of 20 pence for, you know, half an hour. So we can do that with our machines. We don't have to, what we've done here. The same as if you go to Yorkshire and Shrewsbury, the places I've used it. So I was really excited when I saw those machines. What I cannot understand is why £1.80 for the first hour. That's what's put people off at the moment. So do I take it that when you say 50 pence, do you mean 50 pence a half an hour, £1 an hour? Is that what we're talking about? I've got some.
Sorry.
Can I just finish it off? And you talked about enforcement. Now, some of us, I believe the enforcement is now in the hands of Kingdom. Am I right? The last time Kingdom were in charge of enforcement, I had to stop somebody fining one of the Halesowen in Bloom volunteers who was watering and petals were falling on the floor. I am not exaggerating. So really, I hope the guidance when it comes to enforcement with Kingdom is going to be quite strict. And I'm not going to have to go around Halesowen shouting at somebody. He said, I'm going to report you to the council. So I took out my badge and said, you already have. It's just that we've got to be so careful. I don't know how they get paid. Do they get paid by how many fines they do? But we've got to have some reasonableness in enforcement. I know that I talked about waste, littering, but it's really the same people, won't it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Phipps, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you. So the announcement that was made focused on the consideration of a new 30-minute tariff. We don't have a 30-minute tariff at the moment. 1 hour is the shortest that you can go for. So the consideration for the introduction of that would be on the basis 50 pence for that half hour, £1 for the hour. So it would be simplifying the charges and bringing them down. Now, obviously, that will have a financial impact on the council. So what we would need to do, and this is why we've said that we want, because it's a thing that's something, probably one of the main things that's been raised since last year. And so we've recognised that. We wanted to make sure people were reassured it is being looked at, but we've got a whole governance process to go through, and it'll be done as part of the fees and charges review later on in the year. But that's certainly what we're looking at. Now, one thing that we haven't sort of like put the mechanics together on just yet, but I certainly want us to make sure that we do this, is get feedback from businesses as to whether they think the 50 pence half hour is helpful, because it could go one of two ways. Some people might think half an hour is not long enough. It might be actually that in some car parks, half an hour is fine, but in other car parks, half an hour won't get you very far. So it might be an hour that's more appropriate there. So that's something that we need to get, feedback from businesses around the borough, feedback from residents, and the fees and charges, once we reach a position where we're ready to propose something, will be subject to a full consultation process anyway. But we want to get that feedback in the meantime and work out, is this something that businesses want, or actually do they think, don't worry about the half an hour. An hour is probably the minimum we would want people to buy to park for, so they're not having to rush off, and £1 is good for that tariff. So that's the first element, and it's not just the 50p. There's a whole range of looking at bringing down some of the 1 and 2 hour charges as well. On the enforcement contract, just checked that it's not Kingdom that is performing enforcement on car parking, it's NSL. In terms of the actual details of the contract and how it's funded, I'm going to ask Nick to go through that, if that's okay.
Yeah, Nick, do you want to go there?
Yeah, thank you. So rather than bore you with the exact details of the contract, what I'll confirm to you is essentially the contract isn't based on how many PCNs that they issue. The contract is based on a length of time with however many enforcement officers they have at any one time. So it certainly isn't the case of that. I think just to give you a bit of an overview of NSL and who they are part of what's called Marston Holdings Group. NSL are one of two of the market sector leaders, if you like, up and down the country. So again, not only do they support with the enforcement, which we are now at a position where we are now running at the national average, whereas Dudley was at least was decreased by about half of that when it was run in-house internally. And so they are also supporting us with elements that are incorrect with our traffic regulation orders, for example, places that can't be enforced or places that shouldn't be enforced, etc. So all of that data is now building up. So whether we're talking the car parking tariffs as of October, or NSL as an enforcement contractor, what you can start to see is this council is now getting the vital data it requires to make some of the the decisions that we'd like to discuss further, as in a parking strategy for the borough. Whereas we didn't have this information before, sadly.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Roberts up next.
I've got a couple of questions. Do you want them one at a time, or yeah? Back to the 50p for half an hour, Councillor Phipps. We've recently done some door knocking in my ward, and since this announcement, and most of the people I've spoken to, if they do visit the town centre, is for the opticians, dentists, banks, and it's impossible to get in and out of any of those within half an hour. So would they then return to a parking fine? if you introduce the £50 for half an hour? Because that kind of business cannot take place within half an hour. So would you reconsider that in due course?
If that's okay with
Yeah.
the chair. So on that one then, obviously it's incumbent upon anybody paying for parking to ensure that they purchase the correct amount of time to do whatever activities they need to do. It's not for the council. We wouldn't be saying you can only stay for half an hour. You would still be able to purchase an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours all day. So, you know, those residents that go to the opticians need to ensure that they buy the correct amount of time to be able to do whatever it is that they're looking to do. Under the proposals that we've got, if they are going to be an hour in the dentist, then they would still pay less than what they're paying now. In terms of the half-hour charge, one of the main driving forces behind it, and as I said, I think we do still need to get a lot of feedback from town centre businesses as to whether they think half an hour is appropriate or whether the minimum that we charge for is an hour. Because if half an hour is appropriate, it would be for popping into the post office, popping in to get a sandwich, stuff like that. One thing that has been discussed amongst ourselves with colleagues is areas of the borough where the minimum you can pay for is 1 hour and you're only popping in to pick up a prescription. And when you think about prescription prices, the additional charge on top of that for an hour's parking does really start adding up. So the half an hour would be for things like that as well. It would be for popping in and collecting stuff. But no, in the case of you know, the car parks, there would never be a maximum of 30 minutes. It's not like on street parking. It's a case that there'd still be all the tariffs available. And then even if they are popping in for an hour or two, under the proposals that we'd like to put forward later on in the year, they would still be paying less than what they are now.
Yeah, on page 25 of the report, it says an initial screening document is being completed. What's an initial screening document? Uh, 25.
Go on, where am I looking?
It's under equality impact.
Nick, you all right to pick on that one up then?
Yeah, so I think with that equality impact, what that states, and if we take it in context of what we've listed above in terms of what we would go through in terms of a consultation for a strategy, a policy, or what have you, and we've obviously listed in some of those bits in terms of equality impact. That's just essentially saying that we would do an equality impact based on. It's difficult to say because what we're putting in there is a list of options for consultation rather than any actions. But it may well be that an equality impact assessment is required. If I can give you an example, if we were to introduce, say, parking permits for residents, as an example, that would require an equality impact assessment within a given area in a given zone. But because what this report is referring to are a multitude of options, I suppose that's a generic comment or generic statement at this point. Does that?
Yeah, could we have sort of that?
Yeah, so if we were to carry out a consultation, that would absolutely be part of any of that consultation or any decision reached. So absolutely.
So I'm a little bit confused there. Sorry, Nick. Because it says an initial screening document has been completed. But what I think I hear in you're saying is if you carry on, then you will complete one.
No, so go on.
Yeah, happy to come in just to assist in terms of what my colleague has just outlined. In terms of a parking strategy coming forward, there would be the requirement of an equality impact assessment. At this present time, we don't have a draft strategy, but for the purposes and the benefit of the members, what we're saying is that there is an initial screening, a horizon scanning element in terms of what's been undertaken, and that's what's set out there in terms of ongoing consideration of the impact upon all the protected characteristics. So as I said, it's a very horizon scanning perspective. But as Nick has outlined, if the parking strategy came forward, there will be that requirement with stakeholders, and that would shape that equality impact assessment, and importantly, that equality consideration in accordance with our statutory obligations.
We've got Councillor Edwards up next.
Yeah, cheers. So just quickly to go back on the enforcement side of things, is the enforcement company paid as a contract? So they're under contract, or is there a profit sharing scheme with them? Do we split whatever's made, 60-40 or whatever? Is that how the income's generated? I noticed it says within the report that actually tickets, parking ticket enforcement has reduced. So I think there's been more money coming in via paying for ticket rather than enforcement. Is that, am I reading that right?
So to answer the first question, it's a contract. So there is on any parking enforcement, there is no profit made. There is no ability to make any profit anywhere up and down the country on enforcement. The cost of the contract covers the amount of enforcement officers that we have available, and obviously that varies within the contract. Should there be a requirement for more or less, etc. So there is no sharing of any PCN values. Where it gets tricky is if people do get a ticket, for example, people can pay that off early. Other people may decide not to do that, which just happen or contest it or what have you. So it changes the fee essentially. Again, that does not go to the enforcement company, that goes to the authority. Unable to make any profit on car parking whatsoever. If there are figures, financial figures that actually go over and above the contract that pay for it, it goes back into that service. It is regulated to show that it goes back in. So it's only the enforcement company only get paid based on the contract, the agreed contractual rate of the entirety of the length of the contract.
Perfect. And just then regarding the strategy which you're hoping to implement, I mean, it says it's going to cost 210,000. I noticed within the risk assessment, it says actually it's very unlikely because you ain't got staff in to do it. You ain't got the capability to process this. Is the £210,000 figure based on if it was just added into a team which is already functioning, or is it the plan to look at actually recruiting more people to implement this strategy? And then it says, sorry, just to add a bit more, it says it would take a year for it to be performed. It would take 2 years for it to be implemented. I presume that is, touching just on what Dave was saying, is actually separate to the planned reduction in parking charges already to 50 pence. We ain't going to wait 2 years to get the figures on that.
Yeah, so happy to kind of clarify this. Thanks for the question. So 210,000, I'll ask Nick on the specific details of what makes up that and how it would be delivered. But that is essentially the cost to be able to produce the evidence base, to which we could now work with NSL, who have got a lot more data for us, to be able to put all of that together in something, take it through the governance process with the council, formally get it adopted, go through all the relevant consultation we'd need to do. And in terms of how best to deliver that, I have been in the past a little bit sceptical with always getting external agencies to do these sorts of things, because sometimes there's a question about ownership. Is it something they do and then they walk away and they don't have to worry about ever implementing it? So I am a natural skeptic of that, but certainly on a case-by-case basis, we'll always review what is the best way of delivering each project. Now, this is a significant amount of work in a department that is already being worked extremely hard. So it's certainly something where there would need to be that growth in order to deliver a new parking strategy, which includes all of the things that we've talked about when it comes to reviewing TROs on street, when it comes to looking at permanent residence parking permit schemes and all that sort of stuff. However, that process is a completely separate thing to what we're discussing when we talk about the car parking tariff charges, because that is part of an annual review of fees and charges. So all of the charges that the council sets each year get reviewed. That's going to be reviewed now going forward in the autumn. So essentially, it's like a second part of the budget setting process throughout the year. So you do your main budget in the March, and then in your autumn you do the fees and charges. And we would then be looking to implement any changes when it comes to car parking tariffs as a result of that, once that process had finished. So we'd be looking at, the autumn time to be able to do that.
Yeah, perfect. Because I mean, as Councillor Bill said, obviously with the modern technology which we've got now with the car parking, the machines and stuff, I'm presuming the data is readily available to know what car park, if it's a car park, say C1 has generated an income of X. That wouldn't be part of the strategy. That would just be part of the overall when you look at the budget review in November. Am I right in thinking that?
So I believe we do now. We are able to get all that data with regards to how much each car park's bringing in. And to be fair, NSL also have a significant amount of information that they have when they go out, and we can use that information as part of our decision-making process too. One thing that every local authority across the country has to start doing, and I'm really keen to be able to start utilising this, is the data that we actually have and the data that we can bring in is using that to evidence decision making. It really will help us to make sure that we're making sustainable decisions. And it's not saying that we haven't done that in the past, but our capability to do that has increased significantly. I'll ask Nick to come back on the earlier things when it comes to details to do with would it be done internally, externally, and all that.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a really good question actually, because I think what we've the trap we've fallen into in Dudley is we've looked at parking as two separate things, on street and off street, and I understand why, but cost comes up a lot of the time in that. In terms of your earlier question, in terms of that 200 odd K, which is an estimate at this point in time, we would look for external support to do this. And I think there was a comment earlier about sort of nighttime economy and, looking at bringing, say, experts in. And I think there's a difference between experts and things that we would do on a day-to-day basis. This is one of those similar scenarios. So if I talk you through it really, first of all, we've got to look at what we've currently got. So, sort of when we develop a parking policy, it's what do we need to govern that service? Well, we've got to understand what we have right now. Then it would look at pay and display in car parks as an example. It may well be that that's the status quo. That's where we are. How does it work? We do quite rightly now have data at our fingertips in terms of any pay and display car park within the borough. Is then auditing our traffic regulation orders. So whilst that sounds quite simple, where we may see lines on a road, for example, they all come with legal orders. Are those legal orders still correct? Are they still valid? Are they still worthy within the area? Are they appropriate? Are they giving people fair enough time to pop to the shop? So where we look at, say, free areas of parking on streets, and we had the example earlier of actually some people don't have enough time within half an hour. Actually, some people might utilize those spaces too long throughout the day, meaning that there's not fair chance for others. Again, if you imagine the borough in its entirety, it's a big sort of desktop exercise, if you like. Then there's also elements of moving traffic enforcement. So hopefully people are aware, but we as an authority, we went to government in the tranche 3 of the moving traffic offences to undertake those powers from the police. Which, for those of you who are unaware, it may be a one-way system that people are abusing, or it could be a left turn or no right turn that people are abusing, for example. So for me, the parking policy and strategy is all-encompassing. It's looking at businesses, it's looking at those who park, it's looking at those in terms of residential areas of high density, maybe located near town centres. It's about accessibility, pollution, congestion, and that's why I sort of referenced back earlier to Dudley not having a strategy or a policy. So if you look at things in piecemeal, by the time you get round to the end, it never quite makes sense. So in terms of for that estimated 200K, that's that big desktop study to say, here's the information we've got now. Now, of course, as we've referenced, the car parks we have that data and we have that data hourly, we can pull that off. Also, with NSL undertaking enforcement for us, as they go round, they are also monitoring and feeding back into our databases areas where, if I use an example, they could say the lines are faded in this area, which could make for an argument for someone who's issued with a PCN. Or perhaps the lines could be extended or they could be reduced, or there's a greater need in this area for accessible parking. So all of that is being encompassed since October. So hopefully that explains in its wider context. The actual delivery, for example, is a completely separate piece of work, which I would suggest would be more aligned with the work that we undertake as a council. So if we think about some of those works, it may well actually be related to highways, whether it's lines, signs, things like that.
Yeah, I think, am I right just to carry on?
Quickly, but yes. Yeah.
So I think the point I was making, which, you know, very good information that you give me there, is we look at this figure of 210,000. And in reality, all the information gathering that you would use to implement this or to undertake this strategy is already at the fingertips, because within the town centre, we would know what businesses had closed, you know, whether the car park at the end of their street was actually generating an income or not. I think, like, sometimes you could join the dots up a lot easier than spending 2 years and £250,000 to get the answers, which we could just pluck from different departments just on a spreadsheet. Now, I ain't the expert, so I'm just, I'm looking at it at a very basic level. And then quickly, this will be the last one, right? Have we got any AMPR cameras that belong to the councils for car parking, or would that be something that you'd look at within this? Because when shall I forget your last name? Yeah, so when he said, about overstaying and stuff. Now, obviously, if we get to a lot of other cities and stuff, we look and they have got the AMPR set up, but they've also got the app set up. So, you literally pay as you leave on an app, and it's more of a modern way of doing it. Now, I mean, Hillary's right. We are a lot further into the future now than what we were when Hillary was in charge of that department. But even some of the machines we've got now are just outdated because people, don't use them. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, so thank you. So to start off with, back on the figure, I don't want to make sure you don't miss it. So to start off back on the figure that you've raised there. So I'm like you, every single, like Nick probably gets really frustrated. But we could just do this. Come on, it's simple. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's a lot more difficult than what it might appear to be on paper. I think, and the key issue here is that, everybody is already fulfilling all of the functions of their job roles at the moment to the maximum of their ability, time capable, time requirements as well. So going round and say one part of this, reviewing every traffic regulation order, every set of double yellow lines, every set of single yellow lines, all the parking bays, the times that they are allowed for, the disabled bays, that would be on top of what somebody is already having to do day to day on reviewing new TROs. So in reality, we're looking at budget growth in order to deliver this, because right now everybody is already working to the maximum capacity of their job roles, and that's why it would need additional funding to be able to deliver a strategy like this. Yes, we've got a lot of data that's available to us, but do you know how many traffic regulation orders there are in the borough?
There are literally into the hundreds of thousands. If you think of every line you see on the road, every sign that you see, they all have a legal order against them. It's not one spreadsheet, it's a whole roll.
And so thanks, Nick. And so that is the reason why this comes at a cost. I think aspirationally we want to be able to do this, because actually, why wouldn't you want to be more joined up thinking and have a strategy to deal with car parking and get the approach right, rather than doing things piecemeal. But it is something that we would have to look at budget growth, I think, during the budget process to be able to deliver. And then when it comes to the AMPR cameras, there are no local authority car parks in the country that has AMPR cameras, because we are legally not allowed to enforce through any other method on car parking other than individual civil enforcement officers going out there and issuing tickets in person. I think that that's completely outdated. The private sector obviously has, and that's when you say you go to cities, they're private sector car parks. If we had the ability to do ANPR cameras, that would open up a huge amount of other things that we could actually do with our car parks. We could look at working with, you know, other parts of the council. You talk about our libraries and our leisure centres, to be able to work with them about visitors to those facilities. You possibly could even look towards working with businesses if businesses wanted to subsidise public car parking. You know, you've all got the Tesco's and the Asdas that say, well, you can come and park on our car park for free for 3 hours or whatever it is. Well, what would stop us from entering into an agreement saying, well, if this business wanted to refund people their car parking, we could do that through the ANPR system. We could have a system in that business and they could put their thing on. Now, again, I've probably said that and Nick's thinking that's a legal nightmare. So I've said something that's, you know, I've said something that's simple on the face of it, but these are the possible options that we could have if we were given access to that technology. We're just simply prevented by law from doing it now. And I'll tell you what, it's if there's a member of parliament that wants to bring the, you know, the modernisation of public sector car parking enforcement, I'd back them to the hilt, because it definitely needs to be looked at again, because we are hampered compared to the private sector in what we are able to do. Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry,
You go,
just to finish on that point, because I get that it seems relatively simple in terms of, well, we know where our lines are, we know where our signs are, we know businesses, etc. It is massive. It's significant when we start to think about it. And what I would say is, you know, is officers as well, particularly when, you know, I'm from a highway background, so quite passionate about some of these things. The place where we are in Dudley, we've got to start somewhere. We've got to, because all of these decisions, you know, where we hold that up, or we look at the individual settings or zones or areas, actually have got us to where we are today. So if we can put a policy in place and a strategy, that doesn't get outdated, that gets reviewed. So if there ever was a change in legislation where we could use ANPR, well, fantastic, because now we've got a full set of data that we could potentially use.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got Councillor, is it on this point?
Yes.
It looks like, yeah, okay, you go first.
I have a confession to make. Here we go, everybody. In the middle of Halesowen, there's an Asda, is there not? And if you go there, you don't even have to shop at Asda, and you get 3 hours free parking. And why do we do it? Well, people like me, it's ANPR. And so I have, in a strange way, been defrauding Dudley Council. I just don't use our car parks anymore. I go to Asda for 3 hours. If they can have it, then I agree with you. Why not? Oh, I feel better.
Councillor Sapota.
Most of my points have been answered, but there's a couple of quick ones for Nick, really. Nick, obviously, is the money then for obviously parking charges ring fence then to be then used back into the service? It's not then used like a cash cow to fund other stuff, because that's good. Because like you said, most of the borough, some of the road markings have sort of just gone on. Some areas just need doing. And the other quick question is about residence permits. I know a lot of residents in each of our wards ask for residence permits. I know other councils do, but we've never actually looked that way, because residents don't realise you have to pay for them because they think it's free. So is that something we are still looking at in certain areas where residence permits may be an option?
If you don't mind, you'll have me answer on that point, if that's okay. Yeah, so I asked for residence permits to be added into this report, just a mention of them, because for years, I think probably before, I'm looking to Hillary now, because I don't know whether you might have been the cabinet member at the time, I don't know, but I think it was before my time as a councillor, which I'm acutely aware I've been here for 10 years now, which is quite hard to believe. But it was before my time. There was consultations on residence parking permits in places like Russell's Hall. And in reality, I think, yes, people would have to pay a charge. However, given where we are now, I don't think it would have to be the 120 odd quid that it might have been back then. But then you also have to think about, is residence parking permits actually suitable for that area? Now, Russell's Hall estate, everybody's got driveways. And so in that, well, say everybody, I think most people will have a driveway on that estate. So in reality, you've got access to off-road parking. What are you restricting the on-road parking for? In reality, wouldn't it not be better to look at traffic regulation orders in terms of yellow lines to control any dangerous or any antisocial parking, nuisance parking? For me, I want us to get to a point as an authority where we do offer residence parking permits in appropriate locations. And the prime candidates for those would be areas where people don't have access to off-road parking, terrace streets, areas where residents are competing with non-residents to be able to park outside their homes and to be able to provide some assistance to them, hopefully not through an extremely expensive scheme. You look at ways that we can hopefully do it now with technology where the scheme could be kind of self-administered. You print the permit out yourself at home, you display it on your own car. We don't have to print anything out for them. The only cost to us is then kind of the administration of adding the number plate to the system to make sure it checks out when the civil enforcement officer comes around. And before as well, we just didn't have enough enforcement capability to be able to offer a good service to the people that paid. So if you look at one area in my ward, I'd love for the people on the Andrew Road estate, opposite the bus station, to be able to have residence parking permits so people don't park there, jump on the bus, go into Birmingham all day, because they really struggle to park throughout the day. And so that's the sort of thing that I think we'd look at in the first instance. Again, it would be completely different for this authority to do that. We've not done it before, but I don't see why we shouldn't be looking at it now. Obviously, it all comes with resources and trying to make sure that we can get it in with the resources we've got.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Russon.
Thanks, Chair. First off, a positive observation. I've met a couple of the NSL operatives. They're lovely, absolutely sound. Ended up chatting with one for a couple of minutes the other day when I dropped my son off at school, at nursery. Really good. They said they're still not allowed to get out of tickets, but ho-hum. There was 2 years ago was the last time I saw an update on it, and I may have simply missed it. There was an ongoing experiment into installing on-street electric charging points. If this is too off topic, by all means, an email back would be fine later. And I just wondered if there'd been any follow-up on that.
Yeah, so there is a rolling programme, which I think is funded externally at the moment. So there's a rolling programme of looking at opportunities to install. Sorry, I didn't actually ask if I could come in to respond. Are you happy? There we go. So there is a rolling programme to install on-street EV charging. I think there's been some government announcements on this as well recently that I haven't got the full details on. But certainly there are some on-street EV parking in the borough now. There's one on Nether End Lane, which is near to where I live, which I think we have to, Nether End Road, is it? Yeah. I think we need to review kind of, how effective they're being and get, hopefully we can get data out of them, see how well they're being used and stuff. But yeah, there's a rolling programme of that one. And just to cover your quick point about the enforcement officers, obviously they're not direct employees anymore, but they do a job that at times can be pretty nasty, because some of the stuff that they get confronted with when they try and give a ticket out can be quite off-putting for most people to want to do that job. So actually, these people have got to have thick skins to do it. And I think it's worth recognising, whether they're our employees or not, that it's not an easy job to do. And in reality, from where we've come from to where we are, obviously, pending looking at all the data when we review the contract in future years, it's delivering a far better service than what we were doing previously. And that's one really good example of where I think working with the private sector has delivered a positive outcome for the council.
If I might come back in one more, Chair. Go for it. I did, having read through it, I was only given the papers 3 days ago, but can I just confirm that on street parking, the current time span that people are allowed to remain is safe?
Yeah, so at the moment, there's no plans to review on whole the amount of time that people park for, and there's also no plans to introduce on-road car parking charges. I think what we do need to do, though, is we need to get the on-street TROs consistent with the car parks, because if, say, for instance, it's 50p for 30 minutes in the car park, but then there's on road, which is for an hour that's free, that can be a little bit kind of inconsistent. But there's certainly no plans to introduce charging. And in the future, I think there will be an effort to review all of the on-road spaces just to make sure that the times are consistent and correct. You know, we wouldn't want to be getting rid and, you know, putting them only down to like, 10 minutes or anything like that. But we just need to make sure everything is consistent. Do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, only a really quick one. I think with on street, I think the other thing that gets missed is a lot of this is about accessibility. So ensuring that in those key areas, such as the high street, etc. I mean, these are what car parks were brought around, invented for those who were able to park and walk to their destination or what have you. But there is a thing, and there are areas around the borough as well. But it's about ensuring that actually we have the right number of accessible parking bays for those who really need them as well, and that those areas are safe. So there is a time element, and I know there's a cost element, but that accessibility and also the pedestrian accessibility as well. Nobody wants to walk across a busy road with a family with a couple of kids or a pushchair, etc. So that all plays into the factor of that on-street piece. Like I say, whether it's costings or whether it's timeframes.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Sandal.
Simon, I know you like your data, so here's a number for you. So although we've seen a 293% increase despite the fall of tickets, what is that fall of tickets? That's number one. And then it goes on to say that car park users have changed their parking behaviour. Now, is that behaviour by abandoning pay and display car parks and filling up estate roads, private car parks, pub car parks? You know, we don't have a council pay and display in Sedgley. It's private, it's overpriced, and I know people are using pubs and cafe bars and doctors' surgeries to abandon vehicles to go and catch buses. I was brought up in Kings Winford, so let's go back to that. So the main car park at Manor Park in Kings Winford is now pay and display, but there is an estate around Manor Park that's quite easily inaccessible to abandon your car for a couple of hours, yet still within walking distance to local shops and centres. Are we monitoring this off-street parking around these pay and display car parks?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things in there. So first of all, say in the Sedgley example, if there are none of our pay and display, council-owned pay and display car parks in there, then the behaviour of people parking in, whether it's estate roads or on pub car parks, that I presume will have been ongoing for a significant amount of time. It is, of course, up to private owners of car parks to decide how they regulate their car parks themselves.
Could I just come into that one? We did have one, but now it's an Aldi.
Ah, right, okay, fair enough then. So it is, does Aldi provide free parking on there, I'm wondering?
Yep, 90 minutes.
They do 90 minutes, so it's not as long as some other supermarkets
No.
then. But so, you know, I presume that would have still been the case, even so, for a significant amount of time, because it is in Halesowen, because people have always tried to avoid all-day car parking charges, say in Halesowen. The example that I used earlier, the Andrew Road estate, if you manage to get a space on the Andrew Road estate, you're within, 2-minute walk of the bus station, and then you can get into Birmingham for work all day. So that is something that the council is acutely aware of, and that's why longer term it would be great to do that piece of work to review all of the TROs, not only that are existing TROs and make sure that they're still consistent and right for what we want them to be, but also look at places to say we actually need new TROs to help control that problem. And that would be part of this piece of work if we were able to achieve that budget growth and deliver the strategy as we've put it down on the report here. In other areas, I think it's certainly the case that people will have tried to move away from the pay and display car parks to then try and avoid paying the car parking charges. And that behaviour is an extremely difficult thing to be able to kind of pull back. And I think, we all know what the benefits of having the 2 hours free parking were, and that's why we kept it for as long as we did, despite significant pressure from external parties, from the government, to try and say, why are you providing free parking? That's an instant income stream that you can have. So we went above and beyond keeping that policy because of how we knew it supported the town centres. I don't think that we're in a financial position. I don't think there's going to be many authorities that are ever in a financial position to go back to providing significant amounts of free parking. So it's something that we do have to do in future to then review where people have moved to make sure, one, it's not then causing a significant nuisance, because if it is causing a nuisance, then we need to consider if there's yellow lines that might need to go in, or perhaps looking at residents' parking permits. And that will help to softly encourage people, if they are visiting the towns, to use the car parks that are available, whether they're ours or whether they're private car parks or any other car parks that are available. But in terms of, people parking on private areas, it's not something that the council will currently monitor. But if there are, significant areas of concern where private owners want to take measures to control the parking on their site, they are absolutely at liberty to do so. We obviously then would possibly find that it causes an impact on the road. So we would have to then work out how to respond to that as well. So I think parking is a bit of a law of unintended consequences, because it just moves people around. And so doing it holistically will provide us with a much better outcome if we can do this strategy in the piece of work. I haven't answered your first point, which is to ask Nick to provide the data when it comes just the number of tickets issued, if that's possible.
Yeah, I don't have them off the top of my head, but what I will do is I can supply those, whether it's on a monthly basis or quarterly. Yeah, I can supply those to the committee.
I think it was more the point of trying to assess what the falling numbers were, rather than a monthly update of what we're selling on each car park. So it's more about the fall that you've mentioned, with no data to back that up.
Yeah, and that's the data in which I'll provide. So I can't give you a figure or a percentage, but we do know that, and bear in mind, so we do know that the occupancy of car parking has dropped despite an almost 300% increase in income. What we have to bear in mind, going back to the conversation we had earlier, is the data that we have now is, one, far fuller, and two, far more reliable, based on a whole load of factors, none more so than the tariffs that were in place at that point in time. So what I'm more than happy to do is quantify that from October to today's date, or like I said, I can supply it in monthly form or a percentage, and I'm happy to do it. I just don't have those figures to hand.
I think what we're saying is the October to today's date would be the most useful, if I'm getting the read right. So if we could have that, are you happy with it over email rather than at the next meeting, or would you? Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just very quickly add on, just really quick one? It's about the percentage figure about the increase in income that we've had. It's been talked about quite a lot, but I think one thing that everybody needs to remember is that when you practically didn't charge anything beforehand, the percentage increase in income once you do start charging is always going to be a significant percentage, because you're starting from essentially zero. And it is that position that means that we are able to start looking at, and in the wider context of the whole council, start looking at, well, actually, we want to put something back in because we want to try and bring these down to what we all would think would be a much more acceptable level. And then that would be our basis, because we've managed to turn the council's finances into a much better position from now with things such as this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the point of the question is the fall in tickets and the percentage is obviously because that's going to have a detrimental effect to footfall within town centres.
I think there's one thing that, everyone on an anecdotal basis will say is that there might not have been as many people in the town centres, but it's also about what were people going into the town centres for? Were they visiting the town centres and were they using the businesses were there? Or were they on car parks and, say, for instance, doing work things in the town centres and stuff like that? But that comes all together with, I think, one thing that we should talk about during the year on scrutiny, a wider discussion about the town centres. We've got nighttime economy on there, which I don't think is as affected by car parking charges. It's a very different type of clientele and business on the evenings. But when it comes to a whole rounded approach about looking at how the town centres are doing and what we as a council need to do to encourage those, that I think is something that we really do, if the chair does schedule an extra meeting, to focus on, because there's a lot of opportunities for investment that we've got in some of the towns. Haleslow and Broiler Hill are two that Broiler Hill's had a lot of investment over many years, but Haleslow is now getting £20 million worth of investment through that levelling up fund bid, and we've got to make sure that we use that appropriately to help encourage football into the town centres. So that's not just a parking issue. I think that's a much wider thing, but it's certainly part of the considerations that we're having when it comes to looking at reviewing the charges later in the year.
Councillor Castle.
Interesting to listen to the debate, but the scenario, we live in an area with the highest car ownership in the West Midlands. And we also live in an area where a great many people have to commute to work every day. And I was on the station at Stourbridge the other day, and a gentleman bought a return ticket to go into the office on the Monday morning. Had he have parked his car for £6 in Red Hill and got on the shuttle, he would have been paying £16 a day, £16 and 10 pence a day to go to work. This is not an unusual occurrence. It is a common occurrence. So it isn't all about people coming into the town centres or going to the local shopping area. It's fundamentally about people having to leave the area to make a living. If you think of £80.50 a week, the fare into Birmingham is £10 and 10 pence a day, plus £6 parking, £80.50 a week. You'd have to earn, alone for a 40-week year, you would have to earn just over £4,000 a year to go to work. These are astonishing figures when you think of the area and our average earnings, but these are the facts. And let's look at the quality of our 57 car parks. Up to now, we haven't been able to maintain them in good quality, in good repair. They've often been an embarrassment to the whole area. Do we honestly think we can keep these car parks in a sensible repair that morally people will pay to use? Or do you break your neck getting out of it, falling in a hole? Because that's the state of how our car parks have been for years. So we've got that. That's a moral thing. Do we charge before they're repaired or when they're repaired? And another thing is, I had an experience down at concerning the company we're using. I went away on a day trip and went to pay the car parking fee at Stourbridge. I'd got some change in the car, so I went to pay in cash. The machine was jammed full of coinage and I couldn't put coinage into the machine. Trying to be sensible as a councillor, I phoned in the fact that the machine was in ill repair and nobody could use it with cash. Nothing wrong with coinage of the realm. It isn't compulsory for anybody to refuse coinage of the realm when doing a transaction. I was then told it had been reported. I then had a report back that there was nothing wrong with the machine. They'd lied the head off. If two people stand there, and I can give you a witness with pound coins in their hand and the machine is jammed full, and then they tell you there's nothing wrong with it. This marvellous company you're dealing with? Do they do escalating fines? Because anybody who's dealt with these companies, they start off giving you a fine if they say you've done something wrong. Have you ever tried to appeal with these people? They're awful. They're virtually criminal organisations. And nationally, the millions they're taking are bringing the whole system into disrepute. And yet we are using them. So we've got those two things. Do they use escalating fines?
Councillor Phipps.
And
Should we let
anybody
should we let
who's ever
council-
tried to appeal, I'll finish with this point. Anyone who's ever tried to appeal a £60 parking fine that then goes up to £155 in a matter of 30 days. And this is what they do, these escalating fines. It's penal to the ordinary guy in the street. Has anyone amongst you ever tried to appeal? Because I did recently with the car park on Stourbridge Station in a difficult situation. And I'll tell you what, having anything to do with these people is really going to bring us into dispute because nationally, they're virtually regarded as a criminal organisation.
Councillor Phipps.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll note them down, so I'll take them one by one. People are able to use their car parks to go to work, to commute, and anybody that does that, I would encourage them not to pay per day because there are season tickets available for that exact purpose. And the season ticket prices advertised on the website, 3 months for 222, 12 months for 720, which I haven't done the maths in that short period of time where Nick's just showed me those figures. But I believe that would at least be some saving from parking 5 days a week using the all-day tariff. And it's certainly something that I would recommend people do if they need to use their car parks to go to work. It's a much better situation than what would be presented if they would pay every day. The car parks and the repair, you're absolutely right when it comes to the maintenance of car parks. And I think that is probably as a direct consequence over years of having the 2 hours free parking. We all know that the 2 hours free parking was, I think everyone would agree, was overall beneficial. Times, unfortunately, for this council have changed. And like almost every other council in the country, we're not in a position to offer it free anymore. But by offering it free, I think we all made a little bit of a choice to say we can offer it free, but we're not necessarily going to have the money in the service to keep them at an extremely high level of maintenance. At the moment, it is difficult to say that they're even at a medium level of maintenance because of years of a result of that policy and less money being in the service. Recently, there has been some investment in certain car parks where there's been serious issues with the parking surface. High street car parking, forgive me for using the Halzone examples, they're just the ones that are immediately in my mind because it's where I live and where I represent. But high street car park in Halzone was one of those, but a few other car parks around the borough have also had, I believe, some small levels of maintenance on. And I think it will take years for us to be able to build up the money in the service to be able to, properly get the car parks to, a level where you would look at them and you would say they were pristine. And we also have to think about the multi-storey car parks that we've got and the significant cost to maintain those as well. I mean, Paul Road car park in Halzone, the upper floors of that is already closed. And thankfully, we've got hopefully external funding to be able to deliver that project. But there's other multi-stories that we also have to consider about maintenance too. So that's something that I think will improve in the future, but it's not going to be an immediate turnaround. But the reason why we're in that position, I think, is because of that long-standing policy we've had. Do you want to come back in just quickly on that point, Ian, or?
I think there's a moral point that if you're going to escalate the charges, and there's no longer a really by convenience a choice for many people. They have to use them without them being in good repair. Why not get the money in as you repair and put the charges on and escalate like that? But I don't agree with you charging some of these increases on our car parks until the car parks are in a fair condition.
It's a fair point. I think we all would want to have the car parks in a better level of maintenance. It is, I'm afraid, going to take some time, I think, to get there. And I don't think that we're in a position where we would say, well, we're not going to do any changes to the current tariffs until we've improved them, because we're already charging for them. I'd rather get the charge changes done in the autumn, and then we take the longer term view when it comes to maintenance to make sure that they are of an acceptable condition. And obviously, if there are any dangerous issues on any car parks, then as those get raised, I would expect the team to be able to deal with them as much as they can, certainly as it comes to when it comes to highways improvements and highways repairs and things like that too. Although we do have to accept whilst there is more money in the service now, it's still had years of having practically no income coming in. So that's why we've ended up in the position that we are in. I will move on to the particular instance that you raised with a car parking machine that was broken. So the machines and their maintenance are the council's responsibility. That's nothing to do with the enforcement company that we use. So in that instance, that is something that I will ask Nick to have a look into, if you can provide the details afterwards, so we can find out what happened to that machine and why you were not told it will be repaired, while you were told there's nothing wrong with it, because that's certainly something that does need to be picked up and addressed. So if I could ask you to provide the specific details to Nick, and then I'll ask Nick to make sure he responds copying me in, so we're aware of what's happening with that one. Is that machine working now? Are you aware? Fine, we will find out. And then finally, when it comes to the administration of any parking tickets that are given out, the administration is totally done by this council. It is not a function of the contractor to administer the tickets in terms of once they've been issued. So if an appeal comes in, they're dealt with by our team of officers in the council, and I would expect them, and I'm not aware of any instances that have been, I'm not aware of any systemic issues where there are any issues with, I think, unfairness when it comes to dealing with any appeals. The system for local councils, at least, is quite open and transparent. And when it comes to the private parking companies that you refer to, I would actually agree with you, because again, this comes to kind of national legislation. The parking industry, when we're talking about purely private car parks, so nothing to do with our council car parks now, this is a more general point about private car parks. The industry has been allowed to kind of police itself. And there's, I've worked in Members of Parliament office, and I've dealt with many occasions where people have come to me and said, this parking company is absolutely ripping people off. And unfortunately, I think some of them do. I'm not in any way concerned about the the behaviour of the contractor that we're using at the moment. And besides, the element of administering the appeals is not done by them, it's done by us, so we have control over that. But I would certainly be behind you if Parliament were to regulate private parking companies for their private car parks and the way that they administer the fines, because they do, I think, go far beyond what is acceptable.
Does the authority then use escalating fines?
There is a reduced fine of, I'm not going to say it because I don't know. There is a reduced, we can get the details, but there is a reduced fine if you pay within 14 days, and then it goes up. But if they appeal, what's the issue there with?
No, if it's an appeal period, it's only if you're in an appeal period where you're debating a fine, for example, it would only remain at the fine that was given at the time. So again, I think what you're referring to is those private companies that do keep escalating at the council. If you're in discussion in appeal, actually it retains that price. And I suppose a good point to pick up on, what I would say with the introduction of NSL as the contractor for our enforcement, is what we have seen is we've seen people paying their fines in the 14. We've seen a sharp rise in the people paying their fines within those 14 days.
So you're admitting that we are using escalating fines?
No.
You are?
I think what I'll back Nick up here to say is that I think there will be almost very few examples of anyone where it's a flat fine for the entirety of. So if somebody receives a fine for parking on double yellow lines or for outstaying their paid allotted time in a car park, then they have 14 days. If they appeal within those 14 days, then they will not, if unsuccessful at appeal, have to pay an escalating fine. It would only be if they do not respond to the car parking charge within 14 days, where a fine would increase. I think that's pretty much standard for most local authorities. And also, if there is a situation where, say, for instance, the appeal is refused, they are given additional time, those 14 days again, to pay the initial rate before it would go up. So it's only through instances of people not interacting with it, ignoring it, or not attempting to make an appeal where it would escalate. And I don't believe that is in any way an unacceptable practice when it comes to parking enforcement. I would say that's fairly standard. It's not like these private companies that will keep adding and adding and adding, even if you try and appeal, which I do agree is not an acceptable practice.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. I've got Councillor Roberts up next.
Back to the car parking strategy. Can you assure us that as part of the strategy, you will do full and thorough consultation with the businesses across Dudley and also look at what the impact has been on the already implemented car parking charges? And the second question is, we mentioned the 293%. What does that equate to in hard cash? And is that being reinvested back into our car parks and infrastructure?
Thank you.
Yeah, so when it comes to the car parking strategy, as with any strategies that we do, we would open those up to get comments from the local community. And I think certainly the business community are people that we would want to reach out to, representative groups, traders associations, to ask them for their thoughts. Now, that's just talking about the strategy, which obviously is separate to the fees and charges review later in the year. Fees and charges is a statutory consultation process that we have to go through. But I think what we want to do before we even get there is make sure that what we propose is right first. So obviously we don't want to prejudge what the final consultation will produce, but I would hope to be able to get thoughts and feedback from the business community about the prospect of a 30-minute tariff, about the prospect of reducing them to the £1 an hour, the 50p for half hour, and get all that feedback and information in. And then we make the right choice to go out to the statutory consultation in later in the year. So 2 hopeful assurances there, both on the car parking strategy when we come to do that, but also on the fees and charges. When it comes to the figures on the 293, again, it's something that I think I'll ask Nick to be able to provide to the committee by email, so you've got those specific numbers so you can see them.
And the second part of that question is that funding being reinvested into car parks or infrastructure?
So the money that we take in car parks is used within the highways service overall. Obviously, at the moment, I would say that not everything that is coming in is being put back out to investment, because the authority is in a position where we have needed to raise charges to be able to continue doing all of the important work that we do across the highways department and across that section when we come to, dealing with road repairs, TRO requests and all that sort of stuff. So the money is certainly reinvested into the service, but not necessarily in investment that you'll see in car parking maintenance and stuff at the moment, because we're just not quite in that place. We're still playing catch up from years of not having a significant income in there. I'll ask Nick to correct anything there.
No, you're absolutely spot on. It's a bit like the conversation we'd have with highways. It takes a number of years to get us into these positions, and I wholeheartedly agree about the state of some of the maintenance of the car parks, and whether we talk about highways as well. What I will add on to that, though, if people do have any concerns within the car parks of significant defects that we think are health and safety risk, follow the council's procedure to let us know, and we would go out and we would have a look at those. But no, Councillor Phipps is spot on there. It is going to take us some time to build up to be able to invest, as you worded it, to the level that we would require within the car parks. Of course, what we have, and Councillor Phipps referenced, the wider highways elements, we refresh lining and signing across the borough everywhere. Again, similar with any defects that need rectifying at any given point in time. The reality of the situation is, whatever it is from a highway perspective or a car park, it's going to take us and the country years to get back to a position of real investment.
I just want to be reassured, because last year at the budget setting scrutiny meetings, it did look a little bit like we were putting car parking charges up to raise income to prop up the shortfall in council funding. It appeared that way to a lot of people in the communities.
Okay.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cobb next.
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor Priest. I think my questions have basically mostly been covered by other councillors, but I'd like to raise them anyway. So Councillor Sandal mentioned about basically making the parking issue with the parking charges, like pushing that out to other areas. So basically people using residential parking instead of paying the parking charges. There's an area in my ward in Stourbridge North where that is, residents were rightly concerned before the charges were introduced last year, because they are already suffering with people using the town station and parking on their streets. And also it's right by Red Hill School, which is a huge school as well. And like even staff members like parking their car for the day, or parents using it for school drop off, things like that. So I really welcome your answer on that question. Secondly, it's a follow on from what Councillor Roberts asked about the impact on local businesses regarding the parking charges. Since October, what feedback have you had from local businesses, particularly smaller businesses so far?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it's the same answer provided earlier when it comes to, parking on residential areas. It was always going to be the case. I think, that's fairly common sense thing to know, that if you introduce charges where there have been none before, people will look to try and still do what activities they were doing, but reduce the amount that they would have to pay to do so. So that's completely expected. And what the parking strategy would be talking about is reviewing all those areas where there are particular issues to make sure that the on-road yellow lines, single yellow lines, whatever it might be, are appropriate to make sure that residents aren't significantly hampered by any impact that they might have on people parking on their roads. We do have to remember that if you pay the highway tax, if you pay your road tax, you are entitled to park on the road. And so we need to get a balance right. People expect that there are on-road car parking available, but the whole point about having TROs is controlling that, making sure that we address areas of congestion and making sure that we address areas where people are being unhelpfully disadvantaged simply because of the location of their property where they live. So I think that's, again, the same answer as earlier, but something that we have to look at. And when it comes on local businesses, so personally, in terms of me in this role, I haven't had much feedback because the charges were introduced back in October. So this is something that I've approached kind of fresh from it. I obviously speak to businesses in my local area, and I'm also a director of Hales Owen Bid. So I'm acutely aware of the concerns that businesses have when it comes to the car parking charges. And that is precisely why, whilst we were in a position that we needed to ensure that we brought income into the council to make sure that we could cover all of the work that was being done in highways amidst a very, very difficult financial situation last year, we're now in a different situation, and that's why we're looking to tweak the car parking charges to bring them down to a level which I think is more consistent with other local authorities in the area that charge for parking, and I think would be competitive and would start to entice more people back into the towns that might have gone elsewhere. But it's something that over the course of the next few months, we really hope to get some feedback on the proposals to work out, have we got it right? Because that's just what our thoughts are at the moment. Have we got that right? We'd love that feedback. And any business groups that any member works with, please do point them towards the proposals that have been put out there. And if they want to feedback, they can always get in touch with me and I'll happily have a conversation with them.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Was that everything?
Yeah, that's everything. But I really look forward to discussing the feedback at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, mine's a very simple one, Mr. Chairman. When Councillor Kettle was referring to the parking charges using the public railways from Stourbridge, I was under the impression the Stourbridge Junction, the car parks there were responsible to West Midlands Combined Authority on the park and ride scheme, which I don't believe they charge anything for. So it's clarification really. Have we took over the car parking at the junction or not?
No. So the car parks at railway stations, we've got three. I'm the director of West Midlands Rail Executive, so I should hopefully get this right. We've got Stourbridge, we've got Lye, which doesn't have any associated. Oh no, it has a very small associated car park. And we've got Rayleigh Regis, which is just on the borough boundary. And in all of those, I believe there is a park and ride system in place, and I've took advantage of that when I was working in London last year. So I'm not aware of any proposals to transfer the ownership of those car parks or to introduce charges on them. I would certainly hope that, you know, park and ride is continued to be encouraged, because I think it is extremely helpful when it comes to encouraging people to use what I believe is a good train network that we've got, which obviously will be supplementing soon with the tram that's coming into the Dudley Town Centre and hopefully beyond. But no, I'm not aware of any changes proposed to those.
I'm just going to let Councillor Roberts come in on that point.
Thanks, Chairman. I think you, Cosley, the forgotten.
I'm so sorry, I've done it again.
North of the borough.
I'm so sorry, I've done it again about Cosley. What's the car park at Cosley? I've never visited Cosley Station.
2 car parks at Cosley run by the train companies, which are both overused, which is why we've got lots of double yellow lines already in place in Cosley. But I would like you to remember Cosley for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it is something that I need to start getting right. So thank you.
Councillor Stanley, did you want to come back in on that?
Sorry. In other words, you can use the train station in Stourbridge Junction and you don't have to pay. Because the way it's been put to me, paying this amount of money to get to work from there seems to be quite ludicrous when it's supposed to be a park and ride station. So that it was basically, do you pay to park on Stourbridge Junction, yes or no?
No,
that's what you don't. So you can park.
I presume the only fines would be, for instance, if you were parked in a disabled bay without a disabled badge, or if you were parked over the lines or something.
So in other words, you can park there on park and ride in Stourbridge without having to pay. That's all I wanted to know in that one. Coming back, if I may, with Cosley, I've been banging the drum about Cosley for years. I've suggested places to car parks. It's never been taken up. And yes, I've always sympathised with good folk of Cosley with what they have to put up with not being able to get off the drive or cars parked in front of your house all day. So I'm fully on to that.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. A few questions from me, Councillor Phipps. First of all, do you think this has happened the wrong way round? So the reintroduction of the 2-hour charge is obviously a major change to Dudley's parking. It seems odd to me that the parking strategy follows that rather than comes before it. Is that something you'd have any reflections on? And on that, you may have said it earlier, but just for clarification, when do you envision that this parking strategy would be in place? I appreciate a ballpark estimate might be best there. And just as a third question, you may be able to correct me on the number, but this authority, I think about 18 months ago, trialled school streets across the borough. That seems to me as that's a major part of any parking strategy. Do you agree with that? Will they be included within the parking strategy? And is that something that you think is going to be rolled out further? And do you think the 2 that we had were successful? I think it was 2. You can correct me.
I won't correct you on the number. Nick will if he comes into it. But so first of all, so I think hindsight is a fantastic thing. The position that the council was in last year necessitated the need to be able to secure additional income to continue delivering the services within the highways department that we deliver. If you have no financial concerns at all, I wouldn't be coming to you with a report that was saying we need to secure an extra amount of budget to be able to deliver the car parking strategy, because we'd say the budget is there, we're going to do it. but we are making sure that we do everything within the continued spending controls, tight spending controls within the council. And so that's why if this comes forward, it would need to be in the budget process and it would need to be part of a balanced budget going forward. So in terms of when do we envision it being in place, let's say, for instance, this is for the parking strategy, so not any changes to charges, but for the parking strategy, if a budget is agreed in the next budget setting process, that work could be delivered within the 2026-2027 year, and then we would be looking at starting to make all those changes on the road from the 2027 financial year onwards. Obviously, we want to try and condense that as much as possible, but as Nick has explained, there's a hell of a lot of TROs to review across the whole borough, and making sure we get them right will also require significant amount of work with residents, with local areas, to make sure that we're not introducing something that, you know, is detrimental in any way to existing residents and things like that. School streets, I think Nick's giving you the nod, it was 2. Which ones were they, Nick?
Like real test. I know one, St. Peter's and yeah. Yeah, no one else.
Don't worry.
I can't remember there was 3 in one of the trials. Peter's Hill, yeah.
So I haven't reviewed any data or anything from them, but I have had just a conversation with the parking manager about them. I think they come with some issues to be able to kind of, you know, just get it right. But overall, the policy itself actually does appear to be something that could be extremely effective in helping to address significant parking problems in certain locations. You wouldn't want to do this. Again, I'm using an example that I know about. I'll use one that's not in my ward for once. So let's say, for instance, you wouldn't want to do that on Collie Lane because it's a main thoroughfare. However, for a school that is in a cul-de-sac, that is something that is a little bit more appropriate for a school street, because you are essentially stopping any vehicle that is not permitted from entering that street during the enforced times. I believe that school streets are on a kind of a limited trial from the government in terms of the powers that we've got. So I think the reason probably why it's not in here is because it's not within our gift to be able to expand these just yet. I think it would actually be really helpful, though, if it would be possible to, at the next session on parking, to bring you some information about the school streets and how they've worked, and get any local feedback we can get. It would be really helpful, I think, for us all to review it, because if we decide as a council, you know, if you guys want to recommend it to the cabinet that this works and we should look to try and get more powers from the government, then that's certainly something we can take up. Obviously, there are also resource implications in terms of putting all that in place and everything. But certainly, this is the reason why we wanted to. One of the reasons why I think the council needed to increase its enforcement capacity, just generally, because around schools, it's always a really real concern when it comes to some of the parking. So being able to have the additional powers and also the additional enforcement capacity that we've got will start to help to address those issues. Hopefully that's all 3 of them.
Yeah, thank you. I just noticed that you said you think it's about legislation. To me, it seems like something that's essentially an extension of a low traffic neighbourhood, which obviously we don't have, but there's plenty of councils across the country that have got lots of them. So I think I don't know if you could find out for certainty whether we are held back by national legislation on that one.
Just a point, Red Hill, by the way, through you, Mr. Chairman, Red Hill is within a few yards of the station and is chargeable. Another thing is, in the statement on finance, why didn't we have the local income for the last 12 months to inform us of a perspective?
Do you want to go for both of those? And you'll just need to turn your microphone off.
There we go. So I was just trying to remember your first question. So Nick, jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but I believe that the school street powers are very similar to the moving traffic regulation enforcement powers. They're actually things that the government has allowed us to do as an exception to what the current enforcement regime is. So those are additional powers there are additional powers that have been granted to us on a trial basis. And so it would be up to the government to decide whether we could expand those further. I'm not aware of any upcoming legislation or anything in place at the moment, which is just a blanket extension of that, but Nick might be. So I'm going to bring him in at that.
There is, you're spot on. So what we did was we really wanted to take as much advantage as we could as the combined authority and sort of government legislation of how many trials we could do. Again, it doesn't work for all the areas for some of the reasons that have been outlined. But for those of you who are not aware of a school street, they can either be monitored. It's essentially shutting off an area, a zone in and around a school, so that people can walk their children to school safely, cross roads without having people parked everywhere or people speeding along the roads. They can even be monitored by humans, or they can be monitored by cameras. I touched on earlier around the council's powers and ability to use moving traffic offences, which would ordinarily come under the police. The council has now been devolved those powers. However, again, as it's referenced within the strategy, to put a camera, to put someone physically there, it's obviously additional money, it's additional funds and what have you. Does that mean we won't look to add further school streets in the future? Absolutely not. I think in certain areas, and particularly with the two that we've done and carried out, and I think it was Councillor Caulfield will remind me of this, but I think it was towards the back end of last year we actually brought an update as to those school streets, and I'd happily do the same again because they're really, really successful in terms of how people feel in terms of their safety to and from school. Takes a bit of getting used to because there's people not being able to reverse off their drives at key times within the day. But no, I think again, of course, it costs, so there's an additional cost to those as well. But if the combined authority of the government were looking for further trials, we have those powers through the moving traffic offences to enable us to extend that. But again, it would have to be that sort of cost benefit analysis to review if it was sustainable because behaviours change. So, but yeah, no. So we do have the regulations under the moving traffic offences.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who wants to come on this before we move on to the recommendations? Go on, of course.
Apologies.
Oh, sorry.
Just to answer Councillor Kettle's question in terms of the figures. So, yeah, it's been omitted as part of this. I think realistically, what we did again this time last year in scrutiny was brought back the position statement of where we were. Throughout this evening, what I've done is I've picked up some notes to discuss to provide the financial figures and also the numbers of people parking. So I will do that again later on this week for the committee.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, it's really refreshing. The teamwork going on between the three of you is really good to have answers straight back to us. And, you know, it seems that Councillor Phipps is completely on top of his brief at the minute, so that's fantastic. One thing I will say, and pardon the pun, all roads to me seem to be leading back to resident parking. So I know you said we're going to go on to recommendations and stuff. I think that's something that we should really be looking at. Where I live, you'll know Marwood, Brockman, Pensnet with Russell Hall Hospital. So yeah, so we got Russell Hall Hospital and the car parking issues we've got there. I mean, obviously, enforcement, whoever's covering by the hospital have got a great job because they've just got to walk up and down there and they've got it all day. But the streets fall off it, Broad Street and stuff like that, their residents would probably happily pay for resident parking there to have their own badge. And then the possibility of they would also report them because they're reporting them to me every day, you know. So as with the growth of AI, whether there's the plan to have resident reporting somebody who ain't got the parking permit outside their own house straight into the system to go, well, actually, we've got you there without having to get somebody else to do it.
I'll just really quickly comment on it. I agree with many. Like I say, I'm a lot more familiar with your ward after December last year anyway. We need to by-election in Cosley and then I'll know Cosley inside out then as well. Not that I'm suggesting anything. Sorry. Yeah, I think, you know, I think the position on residence permits has been a kind of a slow change over, the last 12 months or so. I think it's certainly something that we're far more open to now than what, would have been the case 10 years ago when it was kind of last really looked at. It needs to be correct and appropriate for the areas. And so you need to consider, what off-road parking there is for residents and, what are the nearby amenities that cause the issues, whether it's the hospital or whether, as a new employee at the hospital, I'm obviously acutely aware because it took me a few weeks to get my parking pass. So it meant that I also had to find a place to park somewhere along there. So I could see that actually it's not the ideal thing. Russell's Hall do provide, I'll declare an interest, but Russell's Hall do provide free parking for their staff members now, although it's competitive to try and get on the car parks in there because there's so many people that work up there. But yeah, we'll certainly look into all that. And on the point about enforcement, we are hamstrung still by what we're allowed to do. Physically, someone's got to be there, I believe, to put a ticket on a car. So, taking photos and doing it afterwards isn't currently permitted. If they were looking to change that at any point, I think we would welcome it because I think it would be much fairer for everybody and it would boost our enforcement capability. Enforcement is not about bringing fines in. Enforcement is about making sure parking is done fairly and making sure people use the roads appropriately. And so that is something that I think I would welcome if we were given additional powers to do things via camera, photos and stuff like that.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. So moving on to the recommendations. So we have the first recommendation is that the committee members note the current position on parking provision within the borough. I take it that can go through. That committee members recognise the need for investment in the development of a future parking strategy and that the committee provide a steer on any other elements of parking that the strategy should consider. Unless anyone has any big say on those, I'm content that with those. Are there any additional recommendations that anybody would like to make here? My own, which I'd like to open for discussion, is that throughout the working on the parking strategy, I think it's important that scrutiny is involved throughout rather than towards the end. Now I'm aware that you're saying it's going to begin the next municipal year, so I'm going to have to see if we can make a recommendation that's beyond the life of this committee, but certainly I'd be interested in seeing a working group set up on the parking strategy so it can work throughout the year. That would be cross-party. I don't know if anyone else would support on that, or if the cabinet member would have any comments on that.
No comments other than so yes, I do have a comment. I want to use scrutiny to be able to help inform our decision making. Over the last few years, circumstances, this is not through anything that the administration has set out, but circumstances has meant that the council's had to move extremely fast to make decisions to protect the future of the authority, its financial position. As we come out of that, one thing that I would love to be able to do is make sure that scrutiny is involved in the development of policy. So yes, that's an assurance that would certainly be able to provide in terms of getting you involved earlier in that process, not just at the end when you look at what the outcome is. And if you wanted to set something up, as long as you can fit it into our very busy schedules, then yeah, we'll certainly try and make sure we can support that.
And would you agree that it would be looking at the next municipal year, not this one, for that to be useful?
Unless a position changes and I'm able to identify a budget that I can put towards this immediately, which I would love to be able to say I could do, I'm not going to be able to give you that assurance, then yes, it would be looking towards, if a budget is made available for this during the budget setting process, then we get that set up once the new municipal year starts and the budget starts to be released.
Okay. Do any of the members have any comments on that? So the recommendation that I'm proposing would be that we recommend that Richard, go first.
Just through you, Chair. I'm just conscious that we have had a lengthy debate in terms of the actual the parking strategy. A number of points have been discussed. Would it be beneficial to the committee that I, along with my colleagues, formulate all of the pertinent points that have been discussed, circulate that to the committee for approval? Alternatively, I can try and pull out some of the key points that I've observed during the debate, just so we've got some clear direction in terms of what the committee have discussed and the recommendations that they are putting forward to the portfolio holder to ensure that they are considered during the future formulation of the parking strategy, and also some immediate points for consideration for the portfolio holder.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. So, in summary, I suppose your suggestion is that you'll take it away, come up with a draft recommendation that we can approve over email.
Yes, happy for that. If you just in terms of from a governance perspective, if the committee delegate authority down to myself to formulate those key pertinent points, and then at least there is transparency in terms of what's discussed tonight and what the committee have approved.
Okay. Any objections to that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on, then we go ahead.
Just quickly, you'll all be aware, because it was on the agenda of the last council meeting, so it'll be transferred over to the next council meeting, that there is also a motion being brought to council regarding parking charges. And I think that's, the basis of that. Again, it will be asking for a financial impact assessment and stuff on it. So it's something, I don't even know when the next full council is. It's September time, is it? Mm-hmm. So just to obviously bring everybody's attention to that, there is actually a motion going to council regarding
and I'd hope that could feed into any work that working group would do. But if it's possible to feature that in the recommendation or the wording, just to take note of it, I think that would be appropriate. Okay, moving on then to the verbal update on the misalignment of tracks, and as Councillor Stanley rightly mentioned earlier, that we're talking here about the West Midlands Metro. Is that one over to you, Nick, or to Councillor Phipps?
Over to myself. And apologies, I'm going to just read this statement out from the team, really. The service road to the very light rail and the underlying power cables are at a level which would prevent the completion of the metro works once the temporary road surface is removed. This is at a point where the metro track crosses the service road for the Very Light Rail National Innovation Centre. This was identified in 2024. So the Midland Metro Alliance have estimated that in order for the services to be lowered, they have registered a cost associated to these works. In May 2025, the Combined Authority reviewed a funding line through the CRSTS funding for the Dudley Metro interface works. This included the Very Light Rail service issue, together with a number of outstanding interface works that would be delivered by Midland Metro Alliance, funded through the CRSTS funding within a 6 to 8 week programme. So at this moment in time, the designs for this are currently being completed for these works. I suppose the most pertinent line within here is the final one, which is that there are no costs and will be no costs for the council associated to these.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on that? Just you go then, Councillor Edwards.
It might not even be relevant to this, obviously. How did such a balls up happen kind of thing? And obviously it's good that there's no costs. Well, there's no financial cost to the borough or the council. But is the time span extended on it being completed, or will it just fall within the same time frame? And will the issues that we've currently got with the LVR impact anything that's going on there? Whatever that means. Yeah.
In terms of the first question, in terms of why, I don't know. What I would say, having worked in this industry for almost 20 years, is when things are done years apart, these things do happen. And I suppose we were just getting to the point in which those are being matched up, if you like. But no, it doesn't add any additional time on. There were works that were continuing to take place anyway. It was just a case of, obviously this has been highlighted as it would do, as one of those things that has picked up when we, the collective, we got to this stage of construction. But yeah, I don't know the specific reasons. All I would say is, things have been done across the years, and these things do happen.
I think the only question for me then is, in that statement, it said that there's no additional cost to the council. Is there an additional cost to the combined authority?
I would imagine there is an additional cost over and above that was budgeted for those phase of works.
Yeah.
Yes, because I don't imagine they'd have anticipated that.
So one way or another, this is a mistake that's costing the taxpayer, if not through the council, then through the CA.
Yeah, it's funded through, because it's funded through the CRSTS fund, City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlements. What that is that's for those who might not be aware, is that there's a capital part that is utilised for transport schemes, etc. So essentially, that's where that funding has been identified and due to come from, in accordance with the statement that's been made.
Okay. Was there anyone else?
Just that we're getting very close to the completion now of the metro and the link to Bryony Hill. Is there any delay concerned?
So at the moment, I don't have any updates in terms of any delays or any other updates in terms of the timelines that we've currently got at this moment in time. But again, it's something I'm happy to come back to the committee with an update.
I think Councillor Phipps wants to come in.
I'll just refer to an Express and Star article that I saw earlier today, actually, where I think the TFWM project manager said that the project was still on track to be delivered and for trams to be running by Christmas this year. Just to answer all the people in the Facebook comments asking which year. So we are getting regular updates, obviously, on the Metro programme, but that was a positive piece of news that I saw earlier today. If there were any changes to that, then I think that would be when I'd ask Nick to make sure the committee was updated, as of course he would be looking to update me too.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. With that then, finally we're on to consider any questions from members to the chair, where 2 clear days' notice have been given to the monitoring officer. None. Well, that is the end of that meeting. Thank you very much. You said 8 o'clock, so you had you weren't far off. Thank you very much. No, he's here.
Let me back in.